Welcome to my talk about automated processes for even better APIs, which means we set up a new word, which is called API Ops. What is API Ops? API Ops, we will see. First of all, we will speak about DevOps. What is DevOps? DevOps is a broad concept with goals. When I think about DevOps, I want to improve the collaboration between the development and the operations, because these are the two meanings of DevOps. I have a developer and I have an operations guy. So I want to improve the collaboration. I also want to improve the deployment frequency when I speak about DevOps. And I want also achieve faster time to market. That's a real big issue, actually. So we have to achieve to be faster and to deliver more. And the other things around is I want to lower the failure rate of new releases. So I want to do DevOps. And I want to shorten the lead time between fixes, another important thing. And I want to improve the mean time to recover. But how do I measure such things when I talk about DevOps? I can get some measurements around, but it's really difficult in some cases. So I need a model. And the best model to find is actually the CALMS model, which means I talk about collaboration. So I measure all the things around collaboration. How do the people work together well? And etc., etc. And I decide what is the best KPI to keep in order to collaborate best. Then I talk about automation. This is normally the goal when somebody talks about DevOps. Everybody wants to do automation all the time. Everything must be automated. And normally, when you speak with customers or people around the world, everybody says, okay, I do DevOps, so I do automation. But nobody really thinks about how to automate things before thinking about the measurement for automation. So I need a goal to do best automation. So I could say I need 60% of all the processes to be automated. Then I have to look around and see, okay, think about lean principles and processes. So I talk about Kanban, I talk about maybe Scrum to get more into this. And there I can find also some capabilities around and measurements to say, okay, when I use Kanban, I have to deliver something from the left to the right in a short time. And measurement in general is really important to think about when you talk about this CALMS model. You need everything to be measurable. You need everything to be observable. So you have to look around and see certain kind of things and make a belief of what you think is the best step to achieve next. And most important, and the last one in the CALMS model, is sharing. All the things around, all the knowledge, everything about projects, everything about development, about operations has to be shared. And this is something which I can also measure well when I think about what is the best way to share something. Sharing is really, really important in our industry. So there should be no people around holding on all their knowledge they have. Everybody has to share because there's so much things around that has to be shared. When we look further after we looked at DevOps and the CALMS model, we stumble over GitOps. Oh my God, GitOps. Everybody is doing GitOps at the moment. So what could be GitOps? GitOps is normally say some kind of system development and management pattern. It's a real pattern. And the base of GitOps is Git is the single source of truth. Everything which has been done in a development project or in an infrastructure project has Git as its single source of truth. So Git is the single place where all operational tasks for all environments happen. I create something, I create an environment, I change it, and I destroy it. So everything which of the task can be done to an environment is in Git. So Git is the single source of truth. And throughout using Git, all changes are observable and reviewable. So I can see everything of my development lifecycle, even of my configuration lifecycle. When I think about infrastructure as code and so on, everything can be observable. So everything can be seen by everyone. When I have gone through the GitOps movement and thinking about, I have my infrastructure and everything now is really maybe automated when I use GitOps. I have to think about the old CI/CD, so continuous integration and deployment. One of the old myths in software development. Everybody's talking about, but do you really use continuous integration and deployment, or better to say delivery, at its best? When you look at a normal software development lifecycle, you have a develop phase, then you build something, you test it, then it will be deployed, and after it was deployed on a special stage, it will be released in production. And this lifecycle shows up how complicated software development can be. And when you think about Scrum, all of these steps or stages have to be done in a Scrum measurement. When we say, okay, we have a sprint of 2 weeks, all the steps should be done in between the 2 weeks. So at the end of the 2 weeks, we have a release, and we have a release of something that is runnable and usable. When you look normally in the case of this software development lifecycle, nobody really releases something valuable after 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks. It doesn't matter how long the time is, because there are so much steps around that are not really focused in this software development lifecycle. So when we think about APIs and look, for example, at an API producer, it's nearly the same. I have a design phase, then I publish the API. I'm managing the API because a customer or a consumer finds value in using the API, and he uses this in some certain extent, so I have to manage the whole API. And with this managing step of the API, I got to an observability phase where I monitor all the things regarding the API, which had been in this management phase. And then I think about this monitoring and do some analytics around it. And so I get some observability about the usage of the API, the value of the API. And if I get some feedback from a customer, the life cycle starts again. So we are back in this design phase and think about all the things we could do with the feedback from the customer. And this also could be done in a Scrum or Kanban way of life to do it in its lean concept and principles when you think about the CAMS model earlier, so you see what can be done. So for this API, we already in a so-called CI/CD pipeline, because all the things we do here, the publishing, the managing, the observability, the design is not or cannot be actually at the moment be automated in a best way, but the the publishing step, the manage step, and observability, as said earlier, can be automated. And when we think about APIs, we always stumble upon the old battle of API first or code first. When you think about pure API design and look at the API producer lifecycle again, it's the best way to start with API first. So the API is your first citizen in this development lifecycle, because normally you have no direct connection to the development team, which provides the implementation to the system of records. So some kind of integration part or other development steps around when you provide an API to a customer or consumer. So with the API first movement, you're able to gain more traction onto this development for a consumer. Because when you use an API spec like OpenAPI, or when we look further regarding the HTTP or REST and move on to other API styles, we can even think about async API. But when you use a specification like OpenAPI, you are able to communicate with the stakeholders in an easy way, because this specification is readable by machines and humans. And now something happens quite often, that you can synchronize the development of the results of the API, because with this spec you provide to the consumer by an API gateway or a portal or something around this, or even with a simple catalog, the consumer is able to do or to use the information from the API in a real short time and at a real first movement. So when we look into this API spec, we see that we have an OpenAPI 2.0 and 3.0. 3.0 is the newest version of an OpenAPI, and it shows that it's more, compressed, more condensed in a way how to specify an API. We have this info block, we have the paths block. Within the paths block, we can even provide example data with this OpenAPI spec, so that a consumer of the API, by using the API spec, is able to mock information with the API spec. And when we look more deeper into the specification of OpenAPI, we find something called OpenAPI extensions. These are extensions which normally start with an X at the beginning, and then you can expose the vendor or the provider, and in the next step you can define the key of the extension. With this way of writing or customizing OpenAPI, you are able to move a step further, because when we think about automation, it's really complex to have an OpenAPI spec or an ASIC spec and have something like a component, an API gateway or something, where everything is done by configuration. So there is a needed step to move further from an OpenAPI to a configuration. So these OpenAPI extensions help a lot when you think about automation or automating things. So with these extensions, we are able to provide information for the component we use in our architecture, which leads us to the all-known everything as code. I normally say it's everything with code or with the code, but what is behind everything as code or with code? It's all about, at first, configuration as code. So when we have or when we have a look at this GitOps movement, further slides before, and we think about the infrastructure we already provided with via Git, with like something infrastructure as code or configuration as code, we can now implement components by using configuration as code. When you think about API gateways, you can use the OpenAPI spec and convert the spec with all the additional informations to a configuration as code for a gateway, for example. And with this configuration as code pattern, we are really able to automate things still from the beginning. So we write an OpenAPI spec, provide this to our consumers, and with this spec and additional informations, we are able to configure a component in our architecture. And in the next step, when we have a component which is configured with code, we can also think about policy as code. This is a real quite new movement in the world of configuration or everything as code. So this is more when you think about, I have a policy, I need something like Keycloak or around, which provides all the customer data or the identity management data. So everything which is needed to provide access to something, which is normally done by just linking this EIM tool with a gateway or something like that. And with policy as code, we are able to think about policy more in a cloud native way. We can also think about compliance and about actually validating the infrastructure we are using. So when you think about deploying a gateway or EIM tool somewhere at a cloud provider, you can use policy as code to validate all the infrastructure. And even with the policies you provide, you can establish best practices within the atmosphere of policy as code. And even you can do some cost controlling. And when you think about this policy as code, you need special tooling. For example, you can have a look at Open Policy Agent, which is tooling to provide this policy as code. You write down all the policies as JSON data and can just provide the information to all the users who are using this component within the architecture. And with this policy as code, you are able to have really look at the compliance actually. So all this, when we think about all the steps we saw earlier, we can all this combine to think about API ops. So it's a really, really short version of really thinking about, I start the API business and I do a lot of operational stuff with APIs. It's even more. It shows a whole development life cycle within the world of APIs. So with this concept of API ops, which even sounds more like a buzzword actually at the moment, we can help a lot to really provide better APIs for a better experience for the users. I hope you enjoyed my talk about API ops. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the Postman Galaxy conference.